Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolute classic of business literature to demystify the true driving force behind legendary corporate success. If you've ever found yourself wondering how some companies just consistently outmaneuver their rivals while others get hopelessly bogged down in endless red tape, well, you are in exactly the right place. So, let's jump right in.
We're going to be exploring insights straight from this brilliant text, The Mind of the Strategist, penned by Kenichi Ohmae. Now, Ohmae isn't just some academic theorizing from an ivory tower. Far from it. He was actually known as Mr. Strategy in his native Japan. As a director at McKinsey & Company and armed with a PhD in nuclear engineering from MIT, no less, he spent his entire career advising some of the world's most successful international companies. He's a hands-on practitioner who literally shaped winning corporate strategies on the ground.
And it's exactly that background that brings us to the ultimate hook. The question that drove Western executives absolutely crazy for decades. Does Japan possess a secret formula for global business success? You see, as Ohmae traveled the world, senior executives would constantly pull him aside. Simply because he was Japanese, they just assumed he held some kind of magic secret, a hidden formula that allowed Japanese companies to run rings around their global competitors year after year. They desperately wanted him to whisper this magic formula into their ears.
But right off the bat, we've got to separate the widespread myths from the actual reality. Westerners had been totally deluged with theories about Japanese success, right? People loved to cite Japan Inc., consensus decision-making, lifetime employment, even stuff like company songs in quality circles. But Ohmae argues that while those things might offer a tiny sliver of insight, they completely miss the central enigma. The true engine of their success? It's the extraordinary power of the idiosyncratic, intuitive natural strategist.
Okay, so Ohmae points out this really fascinating paradox. You'd naturally assume that these wildly successful companies have massive, sprawling strategic planning staffs, or these incredibly elaborate, gold-plated planning processes. But they don't. In fact, a lot of them were painfully handicapped by a lack of resources. They were short on people, short on money, and short on technology. Yet year after year, they captured market share and built immense wealth. How? Well, it all came down to the power of intuition over rigorous by-the-numbers planning. When you don't have infinite capital to just throw at a problem, you're forced to be intuitive. You have to rely on a razor-sharp, almost instinctual understanding of the market, rather than just waiting around for a 100-page analytical report to tell you what to do. Necessity basically breeds profound intuitive innovation.
And that brilliantly illustrates the core concept of the entire book. The mind of the strategist is a state of mind, where insight and a relentless drive for achievement fuel a thought process that is fundamentally creative and intuitive rather than purely rational. The crucial point here is that winning strategies don't just pop out from rigorously crunching numbers on a spreadsheet. Success actually hinges on leaders, very often founders or chief executives, who possess this intuitive grasp of strategy. They rely on creative leaps that a typical financial analyst might instantly reject just because the numbers don't look absolutely perfect on paper. But here is the villain of our story, folks, the trap of the modern corporation. And this applies to massive institutions everywhere, in the West and in Japan. Modern corporate cultures actually suppress this inventive natural strategist. They become completely obsessed with logic and rationality. They demand comprehensive forward planning, meticulous policies, rigid hurdle rates, and endless exhausting risk analysis. And what does all that actually achieve? Well, it ensures that the company only ever makes safe, tiny, incremental improvements. Think about it. When every single new idea has to clear a dozen rigid hurdle rates and survive endless committees, the truly disruptive, game-changing concepts are literally suffocated before they even take their first breath. It pushes out the real innovators and rewards the people who just conform to the system. Which brings us to one of the most striking comparisons in Ohmae's work. He notes that many large U.S. corporations today are run like the Soviet economy. Yeah, it's bold, it's blunt, and it totally hits the nail on the head. He's comparing these hyper-analytical, heavily institutionalized corporations to the rigid, centrally planned, and creatively bankrupt Soviet economy of the past. To survive in those kinds of environments, companies try to control every single critical function in exhaustive detail, spelling out exactly what can and cannot be done. And in the process, the actual art of strategic thinking just gradually withers away and dies. So if the natural strategist is dying out in these rigid, numbers-obsessed environments, how in the world do we fix it? How do we revive that innovative spark without completely destroying the organization's ability to function?
Ohmae recognized this exact same problem in Japan, where senior management was often based entirely on tenure, meaning brilliant young minds had zero fast track to contribute their ideas. To solve this strategic stagnation, Ohmae proposes hacking the system with what he creatively calls the samurai solution.
Let's break down exactly how this samurai concept works. Ohmae suggests forming a special task force, a group of young, incredibly talented individuals who play a very specific dual role. Step 1. They act as real strategists. This means giving totally free rein to their imagination and entrepreneurial flair, so they can come up with wild, high-potential, disruptive ideas. But they don't just stop there. Step 2. They literally switch hats and act as rigorous staff analysts. They take those wild ideas, test them, digest them, assign priorities, and actually get down in the trenches to help line managers implement them. It creates this incredible dynamic tension. You have a creative visionary dreaming up the impossible, who then immediately pivots to become a rigorous analyst tasked with grounding that exact same vision in reality. It keeps the creatives from just floating away into the clouds, and it stops the analysts from getting bogged down in the mud. It's the perfect marriage of creative intuition and rigorous execution.
Now you might be sitting there thinking, great, I'll just tell my team to start dreaming up wild ideas today. But wait, to keep these samurais from just spinning their wheels in pure chaos, Ohmae provides a fundamental framework for exactly where to focus that creative energy. Because let's be real, insight without a target is basically just a daydream. You need a way to focus the strategist's mind.
Enter the core framework of his entire method, the strategic triangle. Ohmae demonstrates that the true strategist's mind doesn't ever look at business variables in isolation. Instead, they dynamically merge three critical elements: the company, the customer, and the competition. It's the dynamic interaction between these 3 points that eventually crystallizes into a solid plan of action. But how does this play out in the real world? Well, a winning strategy is only viable if it successfully matches the company's unique strengths directly to the customer's most pressing needs, and does so in a way that the competition absolutely cannot easily replicate. If you only focus on the customer and your company, boom, you'll get blindsided by a competitor. If you obsess only over the competition, you lose touch with what your customer actually wants. The intuitive mind holds all 3 corners of this triangle in perfect tension, and that, right there, is where real strategy is born.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway for us here is that true strategy isn't about filling out strategic planning forms or checking boxes for some corporate mandate. Not at all. It's entirely about cultivating a mindset that generates a genuine competitive edge through bold innovation. Analysis is definitely important, for sure, but only as a tool to stimulate the creative process or to stress test those wild ideas that your intuitive mind comes up with in the first place.
And look, this impact isn't just theoretical. In the foreword of Ohmae's book, Andrew E. Pearson, who was the president of PepsiCo, pointed out that by stripping strategy back down to these intuitive, focused fundamentals, Ohmae is able to present them with a freshness that brings back the pure excitement of discovery. When you stop managing purely by the numbers and actually start thinking like a true strategist, business stops being this boring bureaucratic chore and suddenly becomes a thrilling pursuit of competitive advantage. Which leaves us with one final vital question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Are you ready to unleash the mind of the strategist in your own work? Are you going to keep managing strictly by the numbers, trapped in the rigid bureaucracy of the modern corporation? Or are you ready to cultivate your inner samurai, embrace the raw power of creative intuition, and truly master the art of business strategy? The choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I really hope this sparks some incredible, rule-breaking ideas for you and your team.